Hello, this is Phil Talon, and welcome to our second lecture for our class in Film, Visual Art, and Apologetics. And I'm going to talk to you today about the shift from the Christian era to the modern era. And I want to talk a little bit about the development of the history of art and then some of the differences and questions that arise. So start off, I think it's maybe worth noting that there's this feature that you often see in the development of art, where we shift between you might call forces of order and forces of chaos, or the Apollonian and the Dionysian, and we see these tensions as they play out across the history of art. So we're going to begin as we sort of shift out of the formalism of the neoclassical style. We have some examples of this here, and into Romanticism, which you hear about in your textbook from Durness. And Romanticism emphasized emotional expression, freedom of gesture, exoticism, and this movement of art is paired with a lot of writings that are happening in Germany and England, and so here we have some neoclassical examples, and then we shift to the examples of Romanticism, where we see these kind of intense emotional scenes. So these are more Dionysian kind of scenes of power, emotion, different out in poetry as well. And then along with this, we see an emphasis on nature as well. And so a lot of expressive for instance, if you look at the works of Turner, for instance, you see these beautiful kind of wild nature scenes, really lovely, where we have Turner's slave ship and Turner's approach to Venice, and then there becomes an increasing interest in not just the beautiful, but the sublime, or the great. And this is being written about in philosophy, and then gets echoed in art as well. So we find some of the romantics like Caspar David Friedrich, as well as Constable. We have these scenes of wild nature, where humans are small relative to great and vast scenes. And if we look in philosophy, we see, for instance, Edmund Burke and Immanuel Kant writing about the sublime. And so I wanted to share just a little bit about that. So in the sublime, as opposed to the beautiful, you have this emphasis on greatness. And so Burke, for instance, talks about experiencing sublime. So you might encounter a huge waterfall or mountain scene, and it causes this astonishment and maybe even some sense of horror. And so it's so huge that it kind of overwhelms our capacities. And in Kant, we find this as well, which is when we encounter the sublime, it's like it overpowers us, and we're just, as opposed to the beautiful, which we can in some sense kind of grasp and perceive, the sublime is mighty and immense. So we have the shift in art toward this kind of chaotic element, but also toward a sense that the world is much bigger and grander and maybe more difficult to take in than we might find in Christian art. Though there's a great emphasis in Christian art on the sublime as regards the divine, here we have the sublime with regarding nature especially. Here's a fine example from Bierstadt of a sublime scene: vast nature, almost terrifying in its power. As we shift out of Romanticism, we move into Impressionism and Post-Impressionism, and so we have in the earliest examples of this kind of interest in everyday life, just people living their lives. So you have Manet, you have this woman who's there at the bar. There's the first instance of a trademark logo, the Bass beer logo, I think, there in the front, or Degas woman in the tub. Very ordinary scenes, nothing about them particularly grand or hugely significant in themselves, just an interest in the world around them. The Impressionists are also, they were mocked originally with this title. We're focused on the world as it appears to us. There's a shift in modern art away from, you might call, the objective symbolic world of the Christian era, into a more subjective world of the senses. So with With Monet, for instance, you have there kind of a scene of just nature. It's it's not trying to kind of capture nature so much as it is as it appears, as it looks when we gaze upon it. And there's a level of artifice in it as well, which is that we recognize this is also a painting, and that we can see the brush strokes. We can see the way the artist is carrying off this effect. After Impressionism, we move into what's called the Post-Impressionist period, and again, here's this attempt, as Sister Wendy puts it, to capture a fleeting and uncontrollable world. So here's a world that's kind of beyond our ability to make sense of or to grasp. So we see this in Cezanne or Van Gogh, and then in Seurat, for instance, we have this interest in painting itself. So the painting looks quite normal to us, but when you get up very close, you see that it's all these little dots of different colors that all together come together to make an impression. So there's a juxtaposition between the thing and then also how it looks. Following post-impressionism, modern art moves toward abstract expressionism, and this is where we see this interest in the form of art, exploring the nature of art and the possibilities of painting. So we have again a sort of a shift away from beauty as a typical standard and exploration of ugliness even. So we see this in Picasso, even a breakdown in the traditional notions of perspective. So you have multiple contrasting perspectives. And with Kandinsky, we have this return to almost like cave painting style. Kandinsky is trying to capture kind of spiritual reality in his work, one that's found outside of typical religious expressions, and to kind of get back to art itself as this kind of primeval of a desire for the spiritual. As we go further into modern art, we have even more interest in exploring the form. So Mondrian breaking art down into basic shapes and colors. We have Pollock and the interest in the action of painting itself, so we can sort of see, as it were, the movement of his brush strokes. Or with Rothko, we have color in itself being presented to us in this sort of simple form. And Dan Seidel, who's a Christian commentator on art, talks about this. He says, modernist art is art that takes itself as compositional techniques, methods of image making, physical presence, constructive or deconstructive relations, the traditions of art, as its primary subject. Before modernist art is about anything else, an image, a symbol, a communication of experience. It's about the logic and structure of the thing that carries meaning, and how that thing came into being. In this respect, all modernist art is essentially abstract, even though only some modernist art looks it. Modernist art, then, is an art that addresses itself first and foremost to the formal and other means by which painting functions as painting. So there's this concern, again, this sort of shift away from the objective world, talking about God, scenes from the Bible, embedded within a religious structure that's intended to carry objective meaning, into then we shift to kind of the highly personal, the human within a vast natural world, or even to the impressions that a human has moving throughout the world of things that they see, into a concern with art in itself. Postmodern art is another shift away from even just the formal aspects into a performative interaction with the viewer, where the very question of the work's presented identity as art is an intrinsic aspect of its appreciation. So probably the most famous example of this kind of confrontational quality of modern art is Marcel Duchamp's Fountain, where he submitted a urinal under a false name to a gallery as a way of kind of testing what could count as art. And so it's part of the performance of the work is to provoke controversy and to raise these questions. What even is art? How do we even make sense of what its purpose is? In pop art, which is part of postmodern art, we see this in Andy Warhol and Roy Lichtenstein. We have now popular images, things that come from popular culture, from magazines, from the commercial world, presented in the gallery space. And so this kind of questions almost the nature of art. What is its meaning? And but it also presents things that are just ephemeral and everyday as being significant for consideration. John Walford, who was a professor at Wheaton for a long time, says this about Warhol. Warhol's work exposes something chilling. He shows us that when media becomes our primary reality, we lose sight of the distinction between illusion and reality. We feel a surrogate secondhand experience. The media gives us the illusion of knowing something directly, when in fact we encounter only what passes through its selected filter. Reality is mediated for us by someone else. We can know nothing directly. And so there again, there's this questioning quality that the of pop postmodern art often have. Some examples of this sort of art. So there's some more Warhol presenting soup cans, which are indeed have a really lovely design, but presenting them as art is very strange. You see these in the grocery store now, you're seeing them in the gallery. Or Lichtenstein's Wham, so like a scene from a comic book now being blown up and repainted, presented for aesthetic contemplation. We have Jeff Koons, who's creates a sculpture of Michael Jackson and his chimp Bubbles, and is sort of almost like making a joke at the whole gallery experience. Then you have somebody like Rene Magritte, much earlier presenting an image of a pipe and then saying, "This is not a pipe," as a way of sort of making us question what is the thing that we're seeing, the breakdown between the signifier and what is signified. Okay, this actually isn't a pipe, it's a painting of a pipe. And so it's making us question reality itself. So we have this further breakdown between the kind of the way that religious art was intended to function as an invitation into a divine religious reality, until now we get to a point where art is making us question the nature of reality itself and its very purpose. So postmodern art, like postmodernism itself, is defined by this interpretive playfulness and intentional rejection of traditional sources of meaning. Like modern art, it's a reflection on art itself, right? So there's this inward turn, the subjective turn within the modern world. And so with the shift from the Christian symbolic world of artistic practice, the ancient, medieval, and Renaissance periods, modern art is marked by a number of defining differences. So one, which might seem just kind of obvious to most of us, is actually a shift to view the artist as creator. So previously, artistry was largely kind of a craft. It's a trade, like carpentry, that one would be trained in and work to do with a bunch of other people as a part of religious commissions. And there was not much emphasis on the artist as a creative force, creation being the domain of God, and the artist just as one who is copying to some degree something out of the given world. But with the Enlightenment, especially with the work of Immanuel Kant, there's an interest in originality and focus on the artist as innovator. And so less attention is given to the way that a work of art fits into an integrated religious world, and more attention is given to the artist's voice, intentions, unique contribution within a gallery system. So within a very kind of like defined artistic elite set of circles. There are also an emphasis on what we might call questions over answers. So art in the Christian era was often situated comfortably into a given symbolic world and religious world, where modern art is marked by a more inquisitive and questioning approach. Social issues, like you find in Picasso's Guernica, or personal perspective, like you see in the Impressionists, and even artistic expectations and norms themselves, as you find, say, in the work of Mondrian, who's kind of breaking down what even would normally count as art. These are placed at the center of concern. So this art is often marked by spiritual, moral, and social questions, but the answers are uncertain. So combined with the emphasis on originality, the very form of art itself becomes a preoccupying concern as artists seek to test the limits and nature of art itself, even reaching almost a breakdown point in postmodernism. And finally, and this is maybe worth drawing to our attention, that with modern art, aesthetic contemplation becomes a central goal, whereas religious art in previous ages was embedded within religious structures, often served a devotional purpose. Centering purpose of much modern art is to provide an opportunity for aesthetic contemplation in itself, just contemplation of the work and its artistic qualities. Some art, of course, does provide social, political, and moral commentary, but many of the works are intended to be viewed simply as an aesthetic experience. And often ambiguity is used to invite critical discussion, with part of the intended effect of the work serving as an instigation for debate. So the audience becomes a participant, not in a religious sense of being kind of drawn along in devotion, but in now debating critically the nature of the work. For further reading, you can check out John Walford's great themes in art, Dan Seidel's God in the Gallery, and William Durness's Visual Faith.